Who knew a family dinner could turn into an indictment sheet? When my scheming cousin screamed, "She makes $120,000 a year," the table went dead silent and my stepfather's fist met my cheekbone in the parking lot. They thought I'd be ashamed and stay quiet. But I brought what they didn't have: original documents, a recording device, and a lawyer who loved to win. The smell of bourbon on his breath, the neon lights flickering above us, the way my ears rang after impact, I captured it all. Every receipt, every bruise, every forged signature would become evidence in my three-pronged legal assault. My name is Ava Hartley, and I hadn't set foot in Coldwater, North Carolina for 11 years until that October evening. The risk assessment models I built at North Point Ledger and Trust in Atlanta couldn't have predicted the violence waiting for me at my grandmother's 83rd birthday dinner. The Riverside Steakhouse still had the same cracked leather booths and fluorescent lights that buzzed like dying insects. My mother Evelyn sat across from me, nervously adjusting her napkin while Roy Dalton, her second husband, dominated the head of the table like he'd earned it. The bourbon on his breath reached me from 3 feet away. "So mysterious, our Ava," my cousin Mara Pierce chirped, her voice syrupy with false sweetness. She'd always been the family gossip, weaponizing information like currency. "Nobody knows what you actually do in Atlanta." I kept my response vague. "Financial services? Compliance work?" Mara's eyes glittered. She pulled out her phone with theatrical slowness. "Oh, but I know exactly what you do. Remember when you forwarded that offer letter 3 years ago, asked me to proofread it?" My stomach tightened. I'd been excited, careless. "Listen to this. Everyone." She read from her screen, voice projecting across the restaurant. "Base salary of $120,000 per annum, plus performance bonuses up to 30%. The table went silent, forks suspended mid-air. My grandmother's eyes widened. Roy's knuckles whitened around his whiskey glass. "That's private information," I said quietly. "Family doesn't keep secrets," Roy growled, his construction-weathered face darkening. "Sitting on that kind of money while we're drowning in bills. Your mother's about to lose this house. I send money when 500 here, 1,000 there." He slammed his palm on the table. "Playing Lady Bountiful while Dalton Hollidge bleeds out. You got responsibilities." The entitlement in his voice made my skin crawl. I'd worked 60-hour weeks for over a decade, earned 2 degrees at night, climbed from entry-level analyst to senior risk manager. Roy had married my mother 4 years ago and acted like her family's assets were his birthright. "I need some air," I said, placing my napkin on the table. The parking lot was dimly lit, autumn wind cutting through my blazer. I heard heavy footsteps behind me before I reached my rental car. "We're not done talking," Roy said, grabbing my shoulder and spinning me around. This close. I could see the spider veins across his nose, the calculation in his bloodshot eyes. "Don't touch me. You're going to write a check tonight, 40,000 to start. Call it a family loan?" "No. No." His laugh was ugly. "Your mother co-signed for my business loans. Her house is collateral. You want her on the street. That's between you and her. My finances are not your concern." "Everything's my concern when family's involved. You're gonna learn respect." "I said no one touches my accounts." The punch came faster than I expected from a drunk man. His fist connected with my cheekbone, snapping my head sideways. I tasted copper, felt the asphalt bite my palms as I caught myself from falling completely. "There's more where that came from," Roy said, standing over me. "You got till Sunday, 40,000, or I make your mother's life hell." He walked back toward the restaurant. I stayed on my knees for 30 seconds, breathing through the pain, then pulled out my phone. The parking lot had one security camera, mounted on the light pole. I took photos of my face from multiple angles, the blood on my lip, the scrapes on my palms. The images auto-uploaded to my cloud storage. I drove to the Comfort Inn off Highway 74 instead of my mother's house. In my room, I found the receipt from dinner in my purse, carefully preserving it in a folder. Then I called the steakhouse. "This is Ava Hartley. I was just there for a family dinner. I need to speak with your manager about obtaining security footage from tonight around 9:45 p.m. There was an incident in your parking lot. While on hold, I examined my mother's purse. She'd asked me to hold it during dinner. Inside her wallet, tucked behind her driver's license, was a credit card I didn't recognize, a Visa with my name on it. My hands trembled as I turned it over. The signature on the back wasn't mine. The activation sticker was dated 6 months ago. I'd never applied for this card, never signed for it, never used it. The security footage, the assault, the forged signature, the fraudulent card. Roy Dalton had no idea what kind of war he'd just started. The motel room became my war room by 3:15 a.m. I'd spread 6 months of my mother's bank statements across the bed, highlighter bleeding through cheap paper as I marked every suspicious transaction. The pattern was methodical, predatory. Dalton Haulage LLC appeared 47 times, transfers ranging from $800 to $3,000, always just under the reporting threshold. But the worst discovery came from a home equity line of credit document $68,000 borrowed against my mother's house, the one my father left her before cancer took him. Roy had used the house as collateral. My childhood home, the only asset my mother had, now secured his failing trucking business. I found the power of attorney document on page 37 of the stack. My blood went cold. There was my name, supposedly authorizing me as co-guarantor on the HELOC. The signature was laughably wrong. Whoever forged it made my A too sharp, the Y in Hartley missing its characteristic loop. I'd spent years signing compliance documents. My signature was as consistent as a fingerprint. At 7 a.m., I drove to my grandmother's house on Willow Street. She answered in her housecoat, already awake, her face creasing with worry at my bruised cheek. "Grandma, I need to ask you about the house, about Dad's will." She poured coffee with shaking hands. "Your father was specific. When your mother remarried, he'd already amended things. There's a consent clause from 2010. What kind of clause? Any loan or lien against the property requires written consent from you if you're listed as co-guarantor. You were 23 then, just graduated. He wanted to protect you both." My father, even dying, had been smarter than Roy anticipated. "Is the original still with Madison and Associates?" "Should be." Tom Madison handled everything. I made 3 calls. First, to verify the consent clause still existed. It did, ironclad and unchanged. Second, to Capital Bank, where the HELOC originated. The fraud department opened a case immediately when I mentioned forged signatures. Third, to Jared Whitlock. "Jared, it's Ava Hartley, Barbara Hartley's granddaughter. Ava, I heard you were in town. Your grandmother speaks highly of you. I need a lawyer, criminal and civil. Are you still practicing?" His tone shifted. Professional now. "What happened?" I gave him the summary: assault, forgery, elder financial abuse. I could hear him taking notes. "Can you come to my office at noon? Bring everything. Every document, photo, recording. Recording. North Carolina is a one-party consent state. Start recording every interaction." The restaurant manager, Derek, a tired-looking man in his 50s, met me at 9 a.m. in the steakhouse parking lot. "Ms. Hartley." I reviewed the footage. The camera caught everything, clear as day. We watched it on his office monitor. 9:43 p.m. Roy following me out. 9:44 p.m. The grab, the spin. 9:45 p.m. His fist connecting with my face. The angle was perfect. Even caught me taking photos afterward. "I can provide a copy to law enforcement," Derek said. "I'm sorry this happened on our property. I'll need that copy for my attorney as well." At Whitlock's law office, I laid out the evidence like a prosecutor. The forged POA, the fraudulent credit card, the HELOC documents, the consent clause from my father's estate, the photos of my injuries, the security footage on a USB drive. Jared examined each document through his reading glasses, occasionally whistling low. "This is systematic financial exploitation," he said. "The forgery alone is a Class H felony. The assault bumps it to Class A1 misdemeanor. Possibly felony if we prove serious injury. Elder financial abuse is both criminal and civil. What's our strategy? He leaned back, fingers steepled. Three-pronged attack. First, we file for an emergency protective order, keep Roy away from you and your mother. Second, emergency injunction to freeze all asset transfers and begin quiet title action on the house. Third, criminal complaints for forgery, assault, and financial exploitation. How long? Protective order can be immediate. Judge Harrison is sympathetic to domestic violence cases. The rest depends on how hard Roy fights and what other evidence surfaces. There's more, I'm sure of it. Jared smiled grimly. There always is. Men like Roy don't stop at one crime. They get comfortable, sloppy. We'll find it all. I signed the retainer agreement, my real signature flowing across the page. As I left his office, my phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number, but I recognized Roy's syntax. You're making this harder than needed. $120K, and we all walk away happy. I screenshotted immediately, forwarding to Jared with a single word, extortion. His response was immediate. Absolutely. Keep him talking if he contacts again. Document everything. The USB drive in my pocket held 90 seconds of video that would destroy Roy Dalton. But that was just the beginning. The house looked smaller than I remembered. Roy's improvements had stripped it of dignity. Vinyl siding slapped over original cedar shakes. My mother's garden paved for his truck parking. I knocked instead of using my key, the recording app running on my phone. My mother answered, her eyes avoiding my bruised face. Ava, you shouldn't have come. This is still my home too. Mom. Roy appeared behind her, beer in hand at 10:30 Mom. The princess returns. You bring my money. We need to talk about the house. Roy, about the loans you've taken. His face darkened. Evelyn, go to the kitchen. She stays, I said, stepping inside. The living room smelled like cigarettes and failure. My father's photographs were gone, replaced by NASCAR posters and a massive television playing sports commentary. You're in my house now, Roy said, chest puffing. Actually, it's my mother's house, with a very specific consent clause requiring my signature for any liens. Your HELOC is fraudulent. You calling me a thief. I'm calling you what the evidence shows. A forger, a financial abuser, a man who hits women in parking lots. My mother gasped. Roy, you didn't... She's lying. Evelyn, trying to break us up. Take your house. I pulled out my phone, showed my mother the photos of my face. The restaurant has video. Mom, crystal clear. Roy stepped toward me. I held my ground, phone still recording. You think you're smart, he growled, coming here with your college words and big city attitude, but you don't understand family. Ava makes $120,000 a year while we're drowning. That's not family. That's selfish. Your gambling debts aren't my responsibility. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Roy's face went white, then red. What did you say? Mom, did you know Roy owes $43,000 to a bookie in Charlotte? That your jewelry's been pawned? That Dalton Hollage hasn't had a legitimate contract in 8 months? You don't know anything. I know everything. I moved toward his office, the converted den where my father once wrote lesson plans. Should we look at your files together? Roy blocked the doorway. That's private. Like my salary was private. I ducked past him. The desk was chaos betting slips, overdue notices, and 3 pawn receipts that made my stomach turn. My grandmother's wedding ring, my father's camera, my mother's pearl necklace from their 25th anniversary. Those were gifts to Evelyn, Roy said. Marital property. I had every right. To pawn them without her knowledge, that's conversion. Roy. Theft by another name. I photographed everything, my phone clicking rapidly. In the bottom drawer, wrapped in rubber bands, was a notebook. Inside, my mother's social security number, her banking passwords, and template documents for powers of attorney with blank signature lines. Mom, I said quietly, has Roy asked you to sign anything recently? Insurance forms, tax documents? Her silence was answer enough. The landline rang, shattering the tension. Roy answered, his face immediately shifting to fear. "I told you I'd have it by Monday." He said, "No, you don't need to come here." I said Monday. He slammed the receiver down, turned to me with desperation creeping into his rage. "You want to destroy this family, fine. But when they come for their money, when your mother's on the street, that's on you. All because you couldn't share a fraction of your precious salary." "You mean the salary you feel entitled to? The money I earned through education you mocked? Hours you belittled? Achievements you dismissed? Family shares? Family doesn't forge signatures? Family doesn't punch women? Family doesn't steal from elderly mothers and pawn dead fathers' memories?" "Get out!" Roy snarled. "Get out before you, what hit me again, please do. Add to the assault charges. My lawyer would love the additional evidence." My mother finally spoke, voice small but clear. "Roy, is it true? The gambling, the ring. Evelyn, baby, she's twisting things. Is it true?" His silence was deafening. I gathered the pawn receipts, the notebook, the photos I'd taken. "Mom, I'm filing for a protective order. It will require Roy to stay away from both of us. I'm also freezing the house transfers and investigating every fraudulent document he's filed. You can choose to stand by him, but I won't let him destroy you." "You vindictive little—" Roy lunged forward, but stopped when I raised my phone. "Please, assault me again. On camera. While I'm recording, my attorney is waiting for this file." The doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw a large man in a tracksuit, neck tattooed with dragons. "Monday, Roy." The man called through the door. 72 hours. Cash only." Roy's hands shook as he opened another beer. My mother sat on the couch, tears streaming silently. I left with my evidence. The recording saved to 3 different clouds. The house of my childhood was now a crime scene, and Roy Dalton was about to learn what happened when you attacked someone who specialized in risk assessment. The bookie's timeline 72 hours had just become my countdown too. The Riverside Baptist Church Fellowship Hall held 200 people. Today, for the Hartley family's monthly potluck, we had about 60 enough witnesses for what I'd planned. Mara had organized it, of course, eager to showcase her planning skills and gossip about my bruised face. I arrived at 2 p.m., with a laptop bag and a portable projector, my cheek purple-yellow under concealer. Conversation stopped as I walked through the buffet line. Mara swooped in immediately, voice carrying across the room. "Oh my God, Ava, what happened to your face? Did your big city life finally catch up with you?" "You could say that," I replied calmly, setting up my equipment near the front. "Everyone's been talking," she continued, loud enough for the entire hall, "about how you make $120,000 but let your poor mother struggle. Roy says you refused to help with their mortgage." Perfect. She'd given me the opening I needed. "Actually, Mara, since you brought up family finances in public again, I thought everyone should know the truth." I connected my laptop to the projector. The first image appeared on the white wall, my bruised face, photographed at the police station. This is what happened when I questioned why Roy forged my signature on loan documents. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Mara's face drained of color. The next slide, the security footage screenshot, Roy's fist connecting with my face. The timestamp clear, 9:45 p.m., October 12th. This happened in the Riverside Steakhouse parking lot after you announced my salary to everyone. Mara. Pastor Williams stood up. "Ava, this is serious. Have you contacted the authorities?" "Yes, Pastor, but there's more everyone needs to know." I clicked through the evidence methodically. The forged power of attorney, the fraudulent credit card, the HELOC documents with my fabricated signature. Each image stayed up long enough for people to read, to understand. Roy Dalton has stolen $68,000 against my mother's house through fraud. He's pawned family heirlooms. The pawn receipts appeared. My grandmother's wedding ring, my father's camera, my mother's anniversary pearls. My grandmother gasped from her wheelchair. "My ring! Harold gave me that ring in 1958. It's at Cash Express on Thornton Avenue. Grandma. Pawned 6 weeks ago. The room erupted. Roy burst through the side door, Evelyn trailing behind him. "Turn that off," he shouted. "You have no right." "I have every right to defend myself against defamation and fraud," I said, pulling out my phone, visibly recording. "Would you like to explain to everyone why you demanded $120,000 from me? Or should I play the audio?" What audio? I hit play on my phone. Volume maximized. Roy's voice filled the hall. "You're making this harder than needed. $120K, and we all walk away happy." "That's extortion," someone whispered. Pastor Williams stepped forward. "Roy, is this true? Did you strike this woman? She provoked me, sitting on all that money while family suffers. So you admit to hitting her?" The pastor's voice had turned cold. "I admit to nothing without my lawyer." "You don't have a lawyer, Roy," I said. "You can't afford one. Just like you can't afford the $72,000 you owe to Dragantran in Charlotte." The name drop was calculated. Several people recognized it. Dragantran was notorious in 3 counties for illegal gambling and brutal collections. "That's none of your—" The main doors opened. 2 uniformed officers entered, hands resting on their service weapons. "Roy Dalton," the senior officer called. "Yeah. We have a temporary protective order requiring you to maintain 100 yards distance from Ava Hartley and Evelyn Dalton. You need to leave these premises immediately. This is a church, a family gathering. Sir, Ms. Hartley is present. You're in violation just being here. Come quietly or we'll arrest you for violating the order." Roy looked around the room at neighbors who'd known him for years, at church members who'd lent him money, at my mother who wouldn't meet his eyes. "This isn't over," he said to me. "No." I agreed. "The criminal trial hasn't even started. Forgery, assault, elder financial abuse, extortion, you're looking at 15 years minimum." Mara suddenly spoke up, her voice shrill. "Ava, this is too much. He's family." "You knew," I said, turning to her. "You knew he'd react violently when you announced my salary. You texted him from the restaurant bathroom. I have the phone records." I displayed the final slide, a text exchange between Mara and Roy from that night. "She's here. Wait till you hear how much she makes." And Roy's response, "Perfect. Keep her there." "You set me up," I continued. "Conspiracy to commit assault. That's another felony charge." Mara collapsed into a folding chair, sobbing theatrically, but no one comforted her. The room's sympathy had shifted entirely. Pastor Williams addressed the congregation. "What we've witnessed today is domestic violence and financial abuse. These are not family matters to be handled privately. They're crimes. I encourage anyone who's experienced similar treatment to seek help." As the officers escorted Roy out, my mother finally approached me. "The house," she whispered. "We'll get it back, Mom. The fraudulent liens will be voided. You'll be safe." The projector still hummed. The last image frozen on the wall, a photograph of our family from 15 years ago, before Roy, before the pain, when my father still smiled from his chair, healthy and whole. Justice had begun in a church fellowship hall, with potato salad and fried chicken as witnesses. The courthouse at 9 MI. Monday morning smelled like old paper and justice. Jared Whitlock met me at the metal detectors, his briefcase thick with motions. "Judge Brennan granted the emergency injunction," he said, guiding me to courtroom 3. "As of 7 AM, Roy can't touch any assets, can't sell anything, can't withdraw more than $500 from any account." "How did he take it?" "He doesn't know yet. Service happens this afternoon. But we have bigger wins. Capital Bank's fraud department confirmed the signature disparities. They're freezing the HELOC pending investigation." In the courtroom, we presented our quiet title action. Judge Brennan, a stern woman with silver hair, reviewed the documents with meticulous attention. "Mr. Whitlock, this consent clause from 2010, it's still legally binding." "Yes, Your Honor. Never amended, never superseded. Any lien against the property requires Ms. Hartley's written consent when she's listed as co-guarantor." And this signature authorizing the HELOC, forensically confirmed as fraudulent. We have 3 handwriting experts' affidavits. The judge nodded. Temporary order granted. No transfers. No new liens. No modifications to the property until full hearing next month. What else? Criminal referrals. Your Honor, the District Attorney's Office has opened investigations into forgery, elder financial abuse, and extortion based on our evidence. That afternoon, I met with Detective Sarah Morse at the police station. She'd been assigned the criminal cases a 20-year veteran who specialized in financial crimes. The pawn receipts are particularly damning, she said, spreading photos across her desk. We pulled records from Cash Express. Roy pawned 16 items over 8 months, all belonging to your mother or grandmother. Never had their permission. That's conversion. Textbook case. But there's more. We subpoenaed his bank records. Dalton Hollidge hasn't had legitimate income in 10 months, but there are regular deposits structured to avoid reporting requirements. Classic money laundering indicators. From gambling. From somewhere. We're tracking the sources. Dragon Tran's operation is already under federal investigation. Roy might have stumbled into a RICO case. My phone buzzed. A blocked number. But I recognized Roy's burner phone pattern. I showed Detective Morse, who nodded for me to answer on speaker while she recorded. You think you're smart. Roy's voice slurred day drinking already. But you just killed your mother. When I can't pay Dragon, they'll come for the house. For her. That's a recorded threat. Roy, adding witness intimidation to your charges. Give me the $120,000. Last chance. Roy, you're on speaker with Detective Morse. You just committed extortion again. On tape. The line went dead. Detective Morse smiled grimly. He's panicking. Desperate people make mistakes. That evening, I drove to Cash Express with the court order and 2 officers. The owner, a nervous man named Gary, pulled out box after box from the back room. Mr. Dalton said these were his items, Gary insisted. He had ID, new details about each piece. Details he learned from living with the victims. Detective Morse noted. We cataloged everything. My grandmother's ring, a 1-carat diamond in platinum setting, worth $12,000, pawned for $800. My father's Leica camera vintage. His pride, pawned for $300. The pearls Mikimoto, authenticated, pawned for $500. Total value approximately $38,000, the detective calculated. Total pawned for $4,300. That's felony theft by conversion. My phone rang. Jared. Ava. Breakthrough. The bank found 6 more fraudulent documents. Roy opened 3 credit lines using your mother's information, 2 using yours. Total exposure $190,000. Jesus Christ. There's more. He tried to add himself to your grandmother's investment account last week. The bank flagged it because the signature was obviously forged. He was getting sloppy. Desperate. I sat in my car outside the pawn shop, watching Detective Morse load evidence bags. Each item represented a memory Roy had tried to monetize. But his biggest mistake was underestimating me. Jared, what's our next move? Full court press, criminal charges tomorrow, civil suit for damages Wednesday. We're also filing for asset forfeiture. Dalton Hollidge's trucks were purchased with fraudulent loans. The company dies with the crimes. Through my windshield, I saw a familiar truck pull into the lot. Dale Dalton, Roy's brother, walked into Cash Express. He emerged minutes later with a small bag, looked around nervously, and drove off. I called Detective Morse immediately. Dale just left Cash Express. Seemed to be pawning something. On it. If he's destroying evidence or hiding assets for Roy, that's conspiracy. The 72-hour deadline was tomorrow. Roy was cornered, desperate, dangerous. But the legal noose was tightening with each document we filed, each asset we froze, each crime we documented. My phone lit up with another blocked number. This time, a different voice, younger, harder. Ms. Hartley Dragon Tran wants to meet. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Waffle House on Highway 74. Come alone, or your mother's house burns down. I looked at Detective Morse through the glass storefront. She was already on her radio, likely calling for surveillance units. The war wasn't over. It was escalating. Detective Morse's voice crackled through the wire taped to my ribs. We have 6 units in position. Dragon's crew just entered the Waffle House 3 men, including Tran himself. Roy's not visible yet. I sat in my rental car at 1:58 p.m., watching the diner through rain-streaked windows. The plan was elegant. Let Roy think he'd orchestrated a meeting with his bookie. Get him on tape admitting to everything while violating the protective order. I'm going in, I said to the concealed microphone. The Waffle House smelled like bacon grease and burnt coffee. Dragon Tran sat in the corner booth younger than expected, maybe 35, wearing an expensive tracksuit that couldn't hide the prison tattoos crawling up his neck. Ms. Hartley, sit. I slid into the booth, keeping my hands visible. You wanted to meet. Your stepfather owes me $72,000. Says you're good for it. He says a lot of things. Most are lies. Dragon smiled, gold teeth catching fluorescent light. That's why we're talking. See, Roy called me an hour ago. Said if I pressured you, you'd pay his debt to protect your mother. He what? Even gave me your routine. Coffee shop on Maple at 7 a.m., your grandmother's house at noon, that motel off 74. Dragon pulled out his phone, played a recording. Roy's voice. Scare her a little. She's got the money. 120 grand a year. She can spare it. When did he call you? 11:43 a.m. from a 704 number. 11:43 a.m. That would violate the protective order's no third-party contact clause. Roy had just committed another felony. I don't pay other people's gambling debts, I said clearly. For the wire. Smart woman. But here's my problem. Roy promised collateral. Your mother's house. Which he doesn't own and can't pledge. I have court documents proving that. Dragon leaned back, studying me. You're the one who got him locked down. Frozen accounts. Criminal charges. Yes. Respect. But that creates a problem. He can't pay if he's in prison. That's not my concern. It is if you want your family safe. Before I could respond, Roy walked in through the kitchen entrance he'd been hiding in the back, waiting. He slid into the booth beside Dragon, reeking of whiskey and desperation. Ava, glad you came to your senses. You're violating the protective order. Roy, you're supposed to stay 100 yards away. This is business. Dragon here needs his money. I pulled out my phone, visibly started recording. For the record, Roy Dalton is violating protective order 24 DV 8756 at 2:12 p.m. on October 16th. Roy lunged for my phone. Dragon caught his arm. Roy, the lady's being reasonable. Let her talk. Mr. Tran, I said calmly. Roy is attempting to extort money he knows I don't owe. He's forged documents, committed fraud, and now he's using you to intimidate me. That makes you part of a criminal conspiracy. Dragon's eyes narrowed. You threatening me? I'm stating facts. There are probably cops watching this place right now. Roy laughed. She's bluffing. Am I? I pulled out a folder, thick with papers. Roy, would you like to explain to Dragon how you promised him a house you don't own? Or should I show him the forensic accounting that proves Dalton Hollidge has been laundering money for the Cordero cartel? That was a calculated guess based on the deposit patterns. But Roy went pale. What money laundering Dragon's voice turned dangerous? 20,000 monthly, structured deposits, started right after Roy's legitimate contracts dried up. Either he's working for the Corderos, or he's stealing from them. Dragon turned to Roy slowly. You running Cordero money through your trucks. No, she's lying. I laid out bank statements, highlighted deposits circled in red. Every second Tuesday, 9,900, just under reporting limits. Dragon studied the papers, then looked at Roy with dead eyes. You brought heat on my operation by mixing with the Corderos. Dragon, I can explain. And you tried to pay me with their money. The wire against my ribs buzzed the signal. I stood up calmly. Gentlemen, I'm leaving now. Roy, the district attorney has this recording. Dragon, you might want to distance yourself from Roy before the federal investigation expands. Sit down! Roy grabbed for me, but Dragon's hand slammed his wrist to the table. Let her go, Dragon said quietly. You and me need to talk about these Cordero deposits. I walked out as tactical units converged. Through the window, I saw officers flooding in, weapons drawn. Dragon and his crew surrendered immediately. They were smart enough not to resist federal agents. Roy tried to run through the kitchen. He made it 3 feet before Detective Morse tackled him into the griddle. Roy Dalton, you're under arrest for violation of protective order, extortion, conspiracy, money laundering. She continued reading charges as they cuffed him. My phone buzzed. A text from Jared. Got it all on surveillance. Roy just admitted to everything on Federal Wire, looking at 25 to life. I sat in my car, hands finally shaking as adrenaline crashed. The trap had worked perfectly. Roy thought he was setting me up with Dragon, but walked into a federal sting operation. The best part. We'd kept my mother's house completely off the table. Dragon never had any claim to it, and now he never would. The courtroom was standing room only. 2 months of investigation had produced 63 charges against Roy Dalton, from assault to racketeering. The federal prosecutor had taken over from the state, given the money laundering connections. I sat behind the prosecution table, my evidence binders stacked like weapons. Roy looked smaller in his orange jumpsuit, shackled at wrists and ankles. His public defender, overwhelmed and underprepared, shuffled papers nervously as Judge Patricia Brennan entered. The United States versus Roy Mitchell Dalton. How does the defendant plead? Roy's lawyer stood, not guilty, Your Honor. Very well. Prosecution, your opening statement. Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Richardson was a shark who smelled blood. Your Honor, will demonstrate through documentary evidence and witness testimony that Mr. Dalton orchestrated a systematic campaign of fraud, forgery, extortion, and money laundering spanning 18 months. The prosecution's case unfolded like a symphony of destruction. First, the security footage from the restaurant Roy's fist connecting with my face in high definition. The jury flinched. Then, Jared took the stand, walking through the fraudulent documents with surgical precision. This signature is demonstrably forged. Notice the pen pressure variations, the incorrect letter angles. Ms. Hartley's authentic signature from the same time period shows completely different characteristics. The forensic accountant testified next, explaining the HELOC fraud, the credit cards, the systematic draining of Evelyn's accounts. Total documented theft, $212,000. Detective Morse presented the pawnshop evidence. Each item appeared on screen: my grandmother's ring, my father's camera, the pearls. Mr. Dalton had no legal authority to sell these items. That's conversion under North Carolina law, theft in layman's terms. But the most devastating testimony came when Mara took the stand as a prosecution witness, having flipped for immunity. Roy asked me to provoke Ava at dinner, she said, voice barely above a whisper. He said if I announced her salary publicly, it would create pressure. He promised me $5,000. Did he pay you? Richardson asked. No. He said the money would come after Ava paid up. What else did Roy tell you? Mara looked at me, tears streaming. He said Ava was selfish, that she abandoned family, that she deserved what was coming. What was coming? He said he'd beat sense into her if necessary. The defense's cross-examination was pathetic. Roy's lawyer tried to paint me as vindictive, wealthy, abandoning family in need. But every question backfired. Ms. Hartley makes $120,000 annually, correct? I do. I answered from the witness stand. Yet you refused to help your struggling stepfather. I refused to submit to extortion. There's a difference between helping family and being robbed by them. You could afford objection. Richardson interrupted. Ms. Hartley's income doesn't justify assault, forgery, or theft. Sustained. When Roy took the stand in his own defense, he sealed his fate within minutes. She flaunted her wealth, he slurred, despite being sober. Coming home in designer clothes, rental car, acting superior. "So you hit her?" Richardson asked. I was teaching respect. "You forged her signature. Family helps family. You pawned her grandmother's wedding ring. Temporary. I would have bought it back." "With what money?" "Mr. Dalton, your company is bankrupt. You owe $72,000 to illegal bookmakers. You were laundering money for the Cordero cartel." "That's not I never." Richardson displayed the bank records. $9,900 every second Tuesday. 67 deposits over 18 months. Just under federal reporting requirements. I was just moving packages. The courtroom went silent. Roy had just admitted to drug trafficking. His lawyer's head dropped into his hands. The jury deliberated for 2 hours. As the foreman stood, I gripped my mother's hand. "On count 1, assault in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. On count 2, forgery in the first degree, guilty. On count 3, elder financial abuse, guilty. On count 4, identity theft, guilty." It continued through all 63 counts, guilty on every single charge. Judge Brennan's voice was ice. "Mr. Dalton, you're hereby convicted on all counts. Regarding the civil matter, I'm granting full quiet title to Miss Evelyn Dalton. The fraudulent liens are void. The house is protected under a lifetime occupancy clause for Mrs. Dalton, with reversion rights to Ava Hartley." She continued, "Furthermore, you're ordered to pay full restitution $212,000 plus interest. All assets of Dalton Hollage LLC are hereby forfeited to satisfy these debts." "Your Honor," Roy's lawyer pleaded, "my client has no resources. Then he'll work it off at 11 cents per hour in federal prison. Mr. Dalton, you're sentenced to 28 years without possibility of parole." Roy lunged from the defense table, screaming, "You destroyed my life. You vindictive—" The bailiffs tackled him before he made it 3 feet. As they dragged him out, he was still screaming about the money I owed him. Jared handed me the sealed court order. The house was safe. My mother was protected. The red seal at the bottom made it permanent. Dalton Hollage LLC was dissolved by judicial order. The courtroom camera captured the final moment Roy being hauled away in shackles while I stood at the prosecution table, holding the stamped judgment that destroyed everything he'd built on lies. The gavel struck. Case closed. The execution of the court order began at 8 a.m. sharp. I stood in my mother's driveway with Detective Morse, 2 federal marshals, and a court-appointed receiver. Roy's trucks, all 3 of them sat like beached whales, already tagged with federal seizure notices. "Ma'am, we'll need you to identify the stolen items for recovery," Marshal Stevens said. "Clipboard ready." We entered through the front door, my mother having stayed with my grandmother to avoid the spectacle. The house reeked of stale bourbon and defeat. Roy's office was our first stop. "That's my father's camera." I pointed to the Leica on the shelf. Roy had apparently bought it back from the pawn shop with his last hidden cash, thinking he could keep it. "Tagged and photographed," the marshal noted. We methodically cataloged everything. The recovered jewelry went into evidence bags for return. The gambling ledgers, the forged document templates, the USB drives containing money laundering records, all sealed for federal evidence. In the garage, we found the real treasure, a hidden safe behind a false panel. Inside, $43,000 in cash, the exact amount Roy had kept from the Cordero cartel. "This goes to victim restitution," Detective Morse said. "First installment on what he owes." The locksmith arrived at noon, replacing every lock while we watched. The security company followed, installing cameras and alarms my mother never had before. By 2 p.m., the house was transformed from Roy's lair back into my mother's home. I stood in what had been Roy's office, now stripped bare except for furniture. On the wall, a faded rectangle showed where his Roy's office sign had hung. I pulled it from the seizure pile and dropped it into the evidence dumpster with satisfying finality. "Ms. Hartley." Marshal Stevens approached with a manila envelope. "Final paperwork. The receiver liquidated Dalton Hollage's remaining contracts, $12,000, per court order. It's been deposited to your mother's restitution account." My phone buzzed. A text from the federal prosecutor. "Cordero cartel members arrested based on Roy's records. Your case just helped take down a major trafficking ring." The next morning, I helped my mother move back in. She stood in her kitchen, touching surfaces like she was remembering what they meant before Roy. "I found these," she said quietly, pulling out a box from the pantry. Inside were all my father's photographs Roy had hidden our family before the destruction. We spent the afternoon rehanging them. Each photo reclaimed wall space from Roy's NASCAR posters and empty beer signs. My father smiled from his frames again, watching over the house he'd protected even in death through that consent clause. My grandmother arrived at 4 p.m., her recovered wedding ring glinting on her finger. 65 years this ring was on my hand," she said. "That man had it for 6 weeks. Felt like a lifetime." "It's home now," I said. "So are you," she replied, squeezing my hand. "The bank called at 5 p.m. Ms. Hartley, this is Capital Bank Fraud Department. We've completed our investigation. All fraudulent accounts are closed. All liens reversed. Your mother's credit has been restored. Additionally, the FDIC insurance covers the fraudulent withdrawals. $68,000 will be deposited within 3 business days." That evening, we sat at the dinner table, the same one where this all started. No Roy, no Mara, she'd moved to Tennessee in shame. Just my mother, grandmother, and me. "I should have seen it," my mother said suddenly. "The signs were there." "Predators are good at hiding," I replied. "That's why they're successful." "You fought for us, with your education, your knowledge, the very things he mocked. He thought my career was a weakness, that making good money meant I owed everyone else. But that salary, it paid for the lawyer, the forensic accountants, the court fees. My success was literally his downfall." My grandmother raised her coffee cup. "To Ava, who proved that family isn't about blood or marriage certificates. It's about who shows up when the darkness comes." We clinked cups as the sun set over cold water. Through the window, I could see the federal seizure notice still taped to Roy's truck. Tomorrow it would be auctioned, the proceeds going toward the $212,000 he'd never finish paying. I flew back to Atlanta the next morning. At North Point Ledger and Trust, my desk waited with its risk assessment models and compliance reports. My colleagues asked about the fading bruise on my cheek. I told them the truth. Sometimes the biggest risks come from those closest to you. The epilogue wrote itself in court documents. Roy Dalton, federal prisoner 47823B, serving 28 years. Dalton Haulage LLC, dissolved by judicial order. The house on Willow Street, protected for life. And me, I still make $120,000 a year. The difference is, now everyone knows that's my money earned, deserved, and protected by the very law Roy thought he could manipulate. The red seal on the court order sits framed in my Atlanta apartment. Some people keep diplomas on their walls. I keep the document that proves revenge isn't about anger. It's about evidence, and I had 63 counts worth. Thank you for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts below. Your own experiences and perspectives mean everything to this community.